August 7th, 2024, and within the last 24 hours, the finalized Democratic, Republican presidential tickets have now been finalized. I'm Tim Darnell. Welcome to this edition of Political Update. Here on Atlanta News First, we're broadcasting from our Midtown Atlanta First Alert Desk, and here are some of the political headlines that we're following for you today, August 7th. Vice President Kamala Harris, who is now the official Democratic nominee for president, has chosen her running mate. Former President Donald Trump and his vice presidential running mate, JD Vance, both Republicans, held a rally over the weekend here in Atlanta. Tropical Storm Debbie has canceled Kamala Harris's planned Georgia trip to Savannah. Georgia's voting equipment, which will be so crucial in less than just about 90 days or so, underwent a critical test recently. And we're going to delve into the background of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who is Vice President Kamala Harris's official running mate. And one of our top headlines, only yesterday, Tuesday, Vice President Kamala Harris chose her running mate, and that is Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Now we're also seeing here on our video screen Donald Trump's running mate, JD Vance. Walz is the governor of Minnesota, a solidly Democratic state. He was rumored really only within the last 24 hours or so to have been really a potential vice presidential candidate to head up the Democratic ticket, running to reclaim or to continue the Democratic presidential administration of President Joe Biden. Kamala Harris is obviously Joe Biden's vice president. She's chosen the Minnesota governor, two-term Minnesota governor, former Minnesota congressman from a solidly Democratic, solidly liberal state in Minnesota. Now, Walz was among the final candidates to be vetted. Others reported to be Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro and also Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. But on Tuesday, Vice President Harris chose Tim Walz as her running mate, and we have this report from CBS News.
Governor Tim Walz of the great state of Minnesota.
Vice President Kamala Harris introduced her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, to a crowd of thousands in Philadelphia and to millions of voters across the country.
He's the kind of person who makes people feel like they belong and then inspires them to dream big. And that's the kind of vice president he will be.
This first stop for the Harris-Walz ticket kicks off a tour to at least 5 other battleground states over the next few days.
This campaign, our campaign, is not just a fight against Donald Trump.
In his remarks, the 60-year-old governor also went on the offensive against former President Donald Trump and his VP running mate, JD Vance, saying he can't wait to debate him.
That is, if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. These guys are creepy and, yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see.
Rallying earlier Tuesday, also in Philadelphia, Vance said he'll debate Walz after the Democratic National Convention.
That is what's so scandalous about Kamala Harris's basement campaign. 16 days she has been the presumptive nominee of the Democrat Party. 0 times she has sat for a real media interview. That's a disgrace.
The Trump campaign released a new video attacking Harris for her VP pick.
Kamala Harris just doubled down on her radical vision for America,
saying, quote, Tim Walz will be a rubber stamp for Kamala's dangerously liberal agenda. Carissa Lawson, CBS News, New York.
As I said, that announcement came on Tuesday, really only 48 hours or so, 72 hours or so, I should say, after former President Donald Trump and his running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, held a rally in Atlanta that was very well attended, very enthusiastic among the participants. Donald Trump is known for bringing tens of thousands of people to his rally. His rally was held only a few days after Vice President Kamala Harris held a rally in the very same location, that being the Convocation Center at the Georgia State University downtown. A lot of attention was focused ahead of the rally when Donald Trump really took on Governor Brian Kemp. Kemp and the former president are not political allies. Kemp has been very outspoken in his criticism of former President Trump's attempts to continue promoting allegations of election fraud in 2020. Before the rally, Trump went on social media as his modus operandi, if you will, to call Governor Brian Kemp, quote, a bad guy, and also threw some criticism not only at Governor Kemp but also Georgia First Lady Marty Kemp. Not a very smart thing to do if you're in a battleground state with a popular two-term governor such as Brian Kemp, but we will see how that will play out later in the year as Georgia continues its role in a battleground state, or as the premier battleground state in the United States 2024 election. Here is a report on their rift from CBS News.
What the hell is going on in Georgia?
It's a statement that sums up the former president's rally Saturday night, where he spent time attacking both Democratic opponent Kamala Harris and Georgia Republican Governor Brian Kemp.
He's the most disloyal guy I think I've ever seen.
Trump spent a significant portion of his rally railing against Kemp for refusing to help him to overturn the state's 2020 presidential election results.
He's a bad guy, he's a disloyal guy, and he's a very average governor. Little Brian Kemp. Bad guy.
Kemp responded on X that he will, quote, not engage in petty insults, but still reiterated his support for Trump over Vice President Harris. Attacking Kemp in his home state might not be wise. According to a June AJC poll, Georgians gave Kemp a 63% approval rating. Trump also attacked the city of Atlanta, which hosted the rally.
Men that are small, men that lack vision, they have fear. And you see that fear come out in this desperation.
Today, Congresswoman Nikema Williams responded to Trump's barbs at local and state leaders.
He stood there on the stage in the state of Georgia and insulted the students, the administration, and our state. But yet our Republican governor is not willing to stand up and say that he won't even vote for this man.
USA! USA! USA!
Supporters, protesters, and a president. Atlanta police had their hands full at the Trump-Vance campaign rally.
And Atlanta is the cornerstone of the political dialogue of our country today.
A particularly daunting task with the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump still fresh on everyone's mind.
It did give us a concern prior to coming.
I don't want to get shot, obviously, and I'm trusting that the police will do what they need to do to protect us.
Chief Darren Shearbaum is confident in his department's abilities to protect the former president and the people of Atlanta.
We've been host to many visits. We had the presidential debate just a few weeks ago, and so we do practice this frequently, and we exercise our plan.
Keeping the peace among supporters and protesters was also a part of that plan.
I'm impressed that they're keeping the rebel rousers at a distance.
We're all here to make sure everyone is safe. We protect the First Amendment, and everyone's political voice can be heard.
As we said, we've been watching the hurricane and then Tropical Storm Debbie hit the Florida Panhandle, moving up into southeast Georgia and other portions of South Georgia. Vice President Kamala Harris was scheduled to come to Georgia this week with her newly appointed running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Those plans were canceled because of the torrential downpour and really just overall dangerous conditions brought on by Debbie to South Georgia. Earlier this week and last week, Georgia's newly minted voting machines were really tested to their limits for their technological capability and overall overall reliability in the upcoming election, now only just over 90 days away. Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and his office were conducting the test, and our own political reporter Doug Reardon has this report.
We want to give voters confidence in the process.
A surprise audit of election equipment in Fayette County Wednesday showed their equipment is working fine and is ready for a consequential election in just 97 days.
By doing it with a surprise audit, you're seeing exactly what the machines are capable of, what they're doing, recording votes accurately.
Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger has been out at audits around the state and will do more before Election Day. Remember, this year all forms of voting will require an ID in Georgia, a state with no reason absentee ballots and 17 days of early voting. And while there's been a push in Georgia for a move to 100% paper ballots, Georgia law requires that elections use electronic tabulators and voting machines. Senior election system specialist Chris Bellew says of the hundreds of tests he's run over the years, no Georgia machine has ever flipped a vote.
I've been with the SOS since 2018, and I have never once seen that occur.
It's not too late to register for the upcoming election, and if you're moving before then, you now hold the power to cancel your own voter registration right from home. Whereas before you had to mail in a cancellation request, now you can do it fully online with less threat to your personal info.
But by doing this online portal, you don't have to actually mail in a cancellation notice, which actually puts your private information out there.
Doug Reardon, Atlanta News First.
And we're wrapping up this edition of Political Update here on Atlanta News First with a look at the career of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Now, he is the newly minted running mate for Vice President Kamala Harris. Tim Walz is governor, a two-term governor in the heavily Democratic state of Minnesota. He is a former congressman. He is also a former football coach, high school football coach. He is a member of the former member of the Minnesota National Guard, and actually rose to the one of the highest ranks for an enlisted man in the National Guard, U.S. National Guard, that being a sergeant major. Now he will be being heavily relied upon by Vice President Kamala Harris to maintain the so-called blue wall, and that being in the upper Midwest, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, some of the Rust Belt states, those and around the Great Lakes area as well. That is a blue wall that Democrats have been relying on in their continuing efforts to place Democrats in the Oval Office. Harris did not choose Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. She also did not choose another rumored finalist, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. Shapiro would have been the first Jewish candidate to be nominated for vice president, and Andy Beshear would become one of the first Southern governors to be on a national ticket. Obviously, the most famous Southern governor to have ever headed a presidential campaign was our own Georgia Governor Jimmy Carter in 1976 and 1980. So we will keep an eye on whether or not Kamala Harris's, whether Vice President Harris's choice as Minnesota Governor, Tim Walz as her running mate, will pay off for her in November. Stay with Atlanta News First every Wednesday for Political Update here on our streaming channels and wherever you get your podcast, as Georgia continues its role as the #1 political state in the nation.